Today we're doing 10.2. We're multiplying rational expressions. Before we get started, I'm going to go back into domain, the last slide of 10.1. So the domain is the possible set of replacement values for a given value. In fractions, the only place that we really worry about is in the denominator, because we can never have a zero in the denominator. So they say simplify and state the domain. Now simplify and state the domain. They're giving you two directions. The first one says simplify, the other says state the domain. Right? Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so before we can truly simplify, we have to factor this. And what can I factor out? What can I factor out there? Anything in the numerator? In the denominator? X times x minus 4. At this point, before you cross cancel, this is where you determine domain. What would x have to be here to give you a 0? 0. X cannot equal 0. What would x be here to give you a 0? 4. Positive 4. X cannot equal 4. But here it's asking for the domain. So you have to write x is an element of the reals. Comma, but x cannot equal 0 and x cannot equal 4. That is stating the domain. Is everybody clear on that? Now the next part says simplify. So now here's where I do my slash and dash. We can get rid of an x. And so I'm left with 5 over x minus 4. That's the simplifying. Do you understand? Okay, why don't you try the next one? Go. Pause the recording. Okay, let's check our work. So the numerator factors to x plus 3, x minus 3. The denominator, 2x minus 3. So what is x not allowed to be? Raising a hand, what did you get? Okay. What? 0 for the 2x, or 3. X is an element of the reals, except x cannot equal 0, and x cannot equal 3. Okay, questions? Okay, so meaning, once I have it factored, what would give you a 0 there? If I multiply 2 times 2, would that be 0? No, so what would make it become 0? A 0. That's why it can't be. What would give you a 0 here? A positive 3. That's it. And then you cross cancel. Okay? You cross cancel for the simplifying. So here's the simplified fraction. And here, yeah, you've got to have it, or down below it. You have to have both. This is asking two things. Simplify, that's the first one. And then the second one says state the domain, that's this. Okay? All right. Did anybody do the third one? I asked people to keep going. What did we factor the numerator to, Noah?
The numerator, I got the quantity of x plus 1 times the quantity of x minus 5.
Good.
Over the quantity of x plus 2 times the quantity of x minus 5.
Good. So what is the replacement values not allowed to be? Negative 2 and positive 5, and x is an element of the reals, except x cannot equal, and then when we simplify, it looks like this. Is everybody clear? Yes.
On the quiz, will the answer the problem be half of it, and then the writing the x is the element of the reals?
I probably will split this direction. On a quiz, I will ask you to state the domain, and in another one, I will ask you. The big thing about the domain is you can't do it here. You got to know what's inside of there. What's inside of there is an x plus 2 and an x minus 5. So you have to factor first. The other thing is you can't cross-cancel before you determine your domain. Okay, now we're going on to the lesson. That was really kind of left over from 10.1. That will come back in all of your sections as well. So multiplying rational expressions. Back in pre-algebra, we used to multiply across the numerator. Remember, the rule for fractions is we multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. We multiply and then reduce. Well, now we're going to reduce and then multiply. We're going to reduce first. So we're going to reduce by cross-canceling. I can cross-cancel a factor of 3 or of 2, right? And then I'm left with a 5 and the 10. And then we can cross-cancel a x. I'm really left with a 1 and a 1. And then we can cross-cancel a 3, and I'm left with a 1 here and a 3 here. And what's left in my numerator? 3y. Don't forget that y that didn't cross out over 5. So we reduce first, then multiply. Okay? Can I erase that? Okay, so why don't you try the next one? Okay, pause the recording and do number 1. Okay, now I'm going to cross-cancel a 5, and I'm left with 1. And when I divide it out of the 10, I'm left with a 2. What else can I cross-cancel? Go, Gracie.
You can cross-cancel an A and an A.
So I take out an A in the numerator, and what's left?
A.
And in the denominator?
1.
Good. What else? Go, Fionn.
You can take out the 3 and the C.
A 3, and I'm left with 1, and in the 6, I'm left with 2. What else? Go.
You can take out C.
Okay, I'm left with a 1, and down here, C. Okay, anything else? Go.
You can cross-cancel.
I'm left with a 1, and this is a b squared. Okay, so now I multiply across, and I end up with a over 4. 2 times 2 is 4. We always write the number first. And then we go in alpha order. B squared C. That's an A. Okay, questions? Okay, it gets a little bit different. Now, before we can do anything, we really have to factor. So basically, you're going to factor, 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 and then reduce the fraction before you multiply. Got it? Okay. So, what does the numerator factor to? Yep, x plus 2 times x minus 2. The denominator is 3x times 6x squared, and then I have a x plus 2. Okay, what can I cross-cancel?
X plus 2.
I have an x plus 2 and an x plus 2. It's numerator to denominator. It can be in the same fraction. Numerator to denominator. Different fractions, still numerator to denominator. What else can we cross-cancel? How about 3? I'm taking out a 3 and I'm left with 1. And out of the 6, I'm left with a 2. What else, Julia? And I'm left with a 1. And here I'm left with a... So in my numerator, I'm left with a 2 and an x and an x minus 2. Oops, forgot the x there. And then in the denominator, I'm just left with 1. So I don't even need to write that. It's 2x times x minus 2. And somebody said to me, can I multiply that out? Why would you want to? I want it in factored form. Okay, questions? Okay, moving on. Can I erase?
Yep.
So basically, we're going to factor all 4 parts of each fraction, or both parts of each fraction. And then we cross cancel. Okay, so let's look at number 3. Right away, I'm noticing this is not a fraction, so I'm going to turn it into a fraction. Okay, so in the new top one, we don't have to do anything. Then what? Go. Do you guys want to try this one on your own? Okay, pause it and you guys do the rest on your own. So what do we do first? How about Max? Where? You're going to factor out an m? No. What do we call that? There's 2 terms. Look at your board. No, look at your board. How do you factor that? There's only one that has 2 things you can factor. No, perfect square trinomial has 3 terms. There are 2 terms there. How do you factor that? Yes, it's a difference of squares. So how does it factor? Times. Good. And then I'm going to cross cancel my m minus 1s, and we're left with what? Can I cross cancel those m's?
No.
No, because you can't take a piece of a binomial. Okay. Did anybody go on to 4? You want to try it on your own? We have 10 minutes. Go. Pause it. We're going to do this again. What do I do to... Does anything happen to the numerator of the first fraction, Max? No. The bottom of the first fraction, the denominator. 5 times x plus what? 2. And then times, how do I factor the numerator? And then in the denominator, 3. Okay, now what can we cross cancel? Let's go with Noah.
Can you cross cancel the quantity of x plus 2?
Okay, what else? I'm left with a 1 and a 1. Keep going. Go. Huh? A 3. Right? And here I'm left with negative 1. Good. What else can be cross-canceled, Julia? Yep, 1 and a 1. And so in the numerator, we are left with, multiply straight across, we're left with negative 1. In the denominator, we are left with 5. There we go. Questions? Is it understandable? Okay, now we're going to have to look at the hard ones. Okay. Next one. So now you're just going to have some trinomial factoring. So, you're going to be doing your what multiplies to negative 3 and adds to negative 2. You're going to be doing what multiplies to negative 8 and adds to negative 2. Over here, what multiplies to negative 12 and adds to negative 1. And here, it's just straight up, what did we call that, Max? X squared minus 9. Right. So this would be x plus 3 times x minus 3. What multiplies to negative 12 and adds to negative 1? So this will be x plus 3 times x minus 4. What multiplies to negative 3 and adds to negative 2? Good. So x minus 3, x plus 1. And then in the denominator, we have x negative 4 and 2, x minus 4, x plus 2. And now we can cross cancel. These cross cancel. Minus 3 cross cancels. Minus 4 cross cancels. And all we're left with is x plus 1 over x plus 2. Can I cancel the x's?
No.
No, because I cannot take a piece of a binomial. Does that make sense? Okay. Moving on, let's look at some strange ones. Okay, right away. It's not much factoring, but what do we need to factor?
The second fraction by -1.
Right, we're going to factor in -1, so I'm going to keep a minus 1 over 4, and we're going to factor a -1 because notice, this and this is opposites. We need to make them become the same. So if I factor out a -1, it flips that term to a minus 1. So now what we have is the a minus 1 cancels, and we can take a 2 out of here, we're left with 2, and 2 out of here, we're left with 3, and so we end up with 3 over -2. Or we can write that -3 over 2. Or we can write it as -3 over +2. Any of these would be acceptable. Do you understand? It doesn't matter where the negative goes as long as we only have one of them. Why don't you guys try number 7? Go. Okay, so the top one, what did you factor it at? How do we factor the first fraction, the numerator? What multiplies to -6 and adds to -1? Yes. So t minus 3 and t minus 2. And the bottom, we can factor to 3 times t plus 2. And in the denominator, I probably would have already seen this and factored it first. But it doesn't matter. We can factor now. So what would I do now? Not yet. I'm noticing this and this are opposites. Factor, don't say multiply. So I'm going to have t plus 1 times t minus 2 over 3 times t plus 2. I wouldn't cross cancel yet. There's cross canceling first. Okay, so look at how they did it just under. You can do that too, so you don't have to rewrite the whole thing. T minus 3, t minus 3. You see how they just put that right underneath? So now what's left in the numerator? A 2 and a t. And then in the denominator, I'm left with 3 plus t times that -1. And we can just stop there. Or you can take it in the numerator. The -2t over 3 plus t. I probably would do that. Okay, did everybody understand what we did with that negative? All right. Now, next one. This is going to be x minus 1 times x minus 1, right? Over 3 times x squared minus 1 times, what do I do here in the factoring? Let's finish this. What do we do here in the factoring?
Factor of 3.
A GCF of 3, and then we're left with x squared minus minus 5. I'm going to factor that now to x plus 1, x minus 5, and factor out that opposite -1. Notice this and this are opposite. So I had to factor out the -1 and flip it around. Are you guys with me? And so we end up with x minus 5 over -1, or 5 minus x, right? -1 times 5 minus x. Stating the domain, I will start you with this tomorrow. If you want to start on it, be my guest, but I will start with this tomorrow. Pause the recording. That's it. Okay, if you want to check the answers, if you already did it, you factor first. X cannot equal 0 here. X cannot equal 4. And x cannot equal -4. So, shh, I'm taping. x is an element of the reals, x cannot equal 0, x cannot equal -4, and x cannot equal +4. And when you simplify it, it's 2. When I cross factor it, in the first one, x cannot equal 0, x cannot equal -2, or x cannot equal +2. So it's an element of the reals, and now I can cross cancel. +2 minus, can't do that. And then we are done. So it's x plus 2 over x times x minus 2. With our x is an element of the reals, x equals 0, -2, and +2. And that's the lesson.